All right, good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today, we're going to look at Pop Talk 6, which looks at managing expectations and compassion fatigue, and discussing the notion that, you don't necessarily need a magic wand. Your job is not to fix everybody, and giving yourself the emotional permission to understand and work with that, really. So I'm just going to share my screen. So again, thank you very much for joining us. For those of you that are regulars, again, thank you. Pass messages on to your colleagues. Today's Pop Talk is about managing expectations. So we will begin by looking at what our aims and objectives are. So by the end of this, we would like to achieve a greater understanding of the expectations and pressures within the probation service. Excuse me one moment. We would also like to identify ways to align expectations and reality, because let's face it, the job that you do is a very difficult job. It's a very rewarding job, but it's also a very difficult job. And for those of you that have been here before, what I'd like you to do is, from this, try and commit to one change in your practice. So when you're observing these talks, what is it? What's the one thing that really kind of sticks out? And one thing that you can do that's not going to add to your workload, that you can change quite quickly and quite easily in order to impact your practice. So we move on. I think sometimes there's this kind of myth in probation that your job is to kind of fix everybody. It isn't. There isn't a magic wand. There isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a tried and trusted way that works with every individual. There are so many variables, so many different experiences, so many backgrounds that it becomes really difficult to attempt to fix everybody. If somebody is willing to change and wants to change, then they have to be the driving force. You can support, you can signpost, you can emotionally help people, but the driving force to change and reduce reoffending has to come from them. And that whole notion of fixing everyone and everything is sometimes very difficult to deal with. So as a probation practitioner, your job can be really rewarding, and I speak to probation practitioners all the time about people who they've worked with and it's really impacted and changed their life. Not just their life, but their family's life, their children's lives, their partners' lives. And if somebody is committed to change and ready to change and wants to work alongside the service in order to change, then they are the driving force, and that has to come from them. Yes, you can support people, and yes, you can move people forward, and you can even supply your own levels of motivation for that, but it has to come from them. As well as the rewarding side of the role, there is also the frustrating side of the role, and there will be times that, you think people are there and they will take a step back, or they'll hit another barrier, or it won't quite go to plan, and that's okay as well. As long as with your successes, you will also have those that the timing for them is not quite right. The circumstances are not quite right. You can supply the foundations and you can support, but that drive and that willingness to change has to come from them. And as we've discussed, there isn't a one size fits all notion in order to get people to where they want to be. Lots of different people will have lots of different experiences, and there will be lots of variables along the way. You've got high caseloads, you work with a number of people, and that spectrum will be kind of far and wide. Sometimes there are certain things that you will do that will really work, and sometimes there will be things that don't quite work. And that whole kind of trial and error culture is something that you almost need to embrace. I get the fact that there are risks attached to that, and I get that. And you guys are professional enough to weigh up the risks and weigh up what you're doing. But ultimately, the cornerstone of what you do is based on your relationship with the person on probation. And a lot of practitioners are very, very good at engaging and creating those relationships. But when you do that, the person on probation also needs to be aware of what the expectations of you are, what they can expect from you. And that relationship is key. So in terms of expectations, and again, there's lots on your shoulders. You've got your own personal expectations. So what do you expect from yourself as much as anybody else? What are the expectations of the service and the KPIs? What are the expectations of your colleagues, particularly if you've got a good, strong reputation? What are the expectations of the people on probation? And these are the sorts of things that you can iron out as part of the relationship initially. And by having good relationships with the people on probation, by having good relationships with your colleagues and others in the service and line management, it will be easier to manage those expectations. And from what I've seen and what I hear on a regular basis, those that manage expectations best are those that are really honest in their approach and open and transparent about what is expected and what is realistic, because sometimes there's kind of a difference between the two. And when you're helping others and you're carrying and supporting people with lots of emotional challenges and barriers, one of the best things that you can do is look after yourself, because you can't continue to support others without looking after yourself. And I've seen it, I hear it. When you're supporting others, the person that gets left behind most is yourself. So there are certain things within your expectations and within your standards that you're going to have to do for yourself. We've looked at previous talks about well-being, and there's one coming up with Nikki Park, who is a director at St Giles, about looking after yourself, and that's talk number 8, which is in a few weeks' time. So that will be interesting for you to kind of sign up to and log on to, and that will give you some practical hints and tips about how to look after yourself and continue to do your job in the capacity that you're doing it. What you've almost got to do is give yourself emotional permission and emotional understanding that you can't fix everybody that you're working with, and not everything will go to plan. Probation practitioners are some of the most resilient people I've come across. There are some fantastic practitioners that do some fantastic things, and to do the job that you do with the constant pressures and the risk and the caseloads means that you are particularly resilient. But there needs to be an understanding and an expectation that you can't fix absolutely everybody. You can do certain things for individuals, and there are certain third sector organisations you can refer to. There'll be certain skill sets within your staff room where you can do your best. But unless that person is committed to change and all their ducks are in a row in order to do that, that does not lie solely on your shoulders. So where you can, use the expertise of others, use third sector services. If somebody's looking specifically for addiction or employment issues, then there are people that you can point them towards. The other thing to remember is that some people are not ready to change just yet. Some people, after one particular sentence, they know they're done, that's it, never again. They're ready to look at a new path. For others, it's not quite so simple. And that change and that readiness for change does not lie solely on your shoulders. And I think practitioners are pretty good at accepting that sometimes things won't always go their way. They've got a range of experience where things have worked out and impacted, and people have made massive life-changing kind of decisions and movements, but others are not quite ready yet. But from that, and you will get some that don't perhaps get to where you would like them to get to as quickly as you would like, to just keep being brave and believing in your ability to do your job and believing in your colleagues' ability to do their job. because between you, you do have the necessary skill set to help people forward. I see it, I watch it on a daily basis, and to keep turning up, to keep supporting people, even when, you know, they take a couple of steps backwards, they hit another barrier, something else becomes in their way. That ability to keep doing it and keep turning up is something that makes practitioners really special. When you're managing expectations, and these are just some sort of helpful tips that you can use along the way, if you communicate your expectations of the person that you're working with early, clearly, and often, it should prevent any issues along the way. So within your first few meetings, what do you expect from the person on probation? What can they expect from you? And that clear communication and honest communication is key. A lot of you will do that already. You'll do that subconsciously or consciously. And it's just being consistent in the approach. The kind of golden thread of what we're looking at the moment is communication, collaboration, and consistency. And it runs completely all the way through this. Align your expectations with the skills and abilities. So again, be realistic in the targets that you set in, not only the people you're working with, but also yourself. What's realistic? What is achievable? Yes, we all like to, push people a little bit and push ourselves, but, we've got to be real about what's going on. Hold yourself and others to account. And that's if you were going to do something for somebody on a certain day and a certain time, if you don't do that, put your hands up, be honest, and hold the people that you're working with to account as well. You said as part of our expectations that you would do this. You haven't done this. Why haven't you done this? What are the issues? What's happened? How can I support you to do this? Is there something different that I could have done? Constant reflection will help the process. Collaborate and communicate with colleagues and superiors. I did an exercise with some staff in Staffordshire yesterday, and within the room there was 247 years worth of experience. Within that range of experience, a lot of the things that you come across, you will have the answers to. Use your colleagues and communicate with them. Something I've kind of noticed a lot is there's lots of fantastic work that goes on. But if we're honest, do we really celebrate successes enough? Do we shout loud enough about them? The impact that we've had, how we've helped and supported people moving through. And do we do that consistently? Because as we've said, the golden thread is the communication, the collaboration, and the consistency of what we're doing. A lot of the stuff that we've done in previous talks links directly to this. So when you're looking at expectations, look at it through a trauma-informed lens. And Nikki did a talk a couple of weeks back on how your awareness of trauma can help the relationship with you and the person on probation. And again, that will be available on YouTube if you want to look back at that and you didn't kind of go through with that. Last week, Tony Walker did a presentation on restorative conversations, and that was all about when relationships break down and how you set expectations from the start. If the relationship breaks down, how you then repair that relationship. And that happens, and that's needed a lot within the probation service, because you're working with people that will sometimes fail to meet the demands of what you're expecting. And when they do that, it's about starting again, but having a conversation to address it and how do we move forward from that. And again, that will be available on YouTube as well. So we're trying to align all of the talks that we're doing in terms of practice. So in terms of the expectations, yes, there are expectations and there are, hints and tips that we can use around those. But when there are expectations, what about the trauma that somebody suffered? How's that going to affect the expectations? If it breaks down, what about the conversation that we can have to repair that relationship? And likewise, the well-being talks. How can we look after ourselves and continue to do the fantastic job that we do? And there are lots of hints and helpful tips along the way that we can kind of provide you with by logging on to these talks.